that ass back like a boom, 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 boom.
Hi guys, how are you all doing? And you're very welcome to what is the first edition of the DriveThru sports show in an absolutely ridiculous length of time, but I suppose in fairness, while I haven't been recording or podcasting, I have been at least doing my very best to output content in other mediums, mainly writing, of course, in that time. But the God's honest truth this evening is that at this point in time I literally haven't the energy to type, having watched two epic games of football in Croke Park today. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how in God's name this is the case, but I am actually an absolute ball of sweat sitting here having watched through the two games. But rather than over push myself to try typing about them all, I said I would take the easy option for tonight and just have a ramble here. Well, I suppose the first and foremost thing to say is that naturally enough, the aftermath of the Galway Armagh game, as in whatever analysis takes place tonight and during the rest of the week, I'm sure is obviously going to be dominated by the brawl as the teams went down the tunnel at the end of normal time. Now, as we know, David Coldrick did issue 2 red cards when they come back out for extra time, one player from either side, so one would assume, well, both of them will definitely be suspended, which from a Galway perspective you would imagine leaves them shorn of Sean Kelly, not only their captain but also their best man marker going forward to the semi-final against Derry, which then leaves them with a conundrum as to who they drop back into full-back to put marking Shane McGuigan. Now, that is not to say that this Derry attack are one-trick ponies. They're far from it, and with Conor Glass breaking through from midfield and the like, they should be able to get a fair spread of scores. But whoever is detailed to pick up McGuigan will have the toughest and indeed most important job of the whole lot on the day. Now, as regards the game itself, well, where does one even begin? Well, when they're within 7 points apiece at half time and normal time, that was a fairly fair reflection of how the game had played out. And to be fair to both teams, it had been ding dong all the way in the first half, but from the time the Armagh player received a straight red card from David Koldrick, which initially looked a ridiculous decision, but having seen it from multiple angles in the interim, even though I absolutely detest this phrase, it would appear that the Blackhall Gaels man didn't have any option, even though I absolutely deplore using that phrase, because I think they always have an option. They can referee it as they see it, but you know, I suppose from a neutral observer's point of view, the surprising thing maybe at the time was that Galway didn't kick on and take care of business when they were a man up with, I can't exactly how long was left, remember how long was left when the Armagh player was sent off, but you know, if you're Pádraig Joyce and Cian O'Neill, you're saying to yourself, well, you've a man up for whatever length of time there was to go, and it's one thing, and again this is only my own view, I can never really understand teams when they have an extra man, that the obvious thing to do if you have an extra man is to use the free players, if you want to call it that, to drive forward and create overlaps and the like. But more often than not, if teams have an extra man now, you'll see them dropping in and using the extra body as an extra screen and defence, which in one way, while it may be understandable, it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day you still have to go and get the scores to win the game, and to that end, where Galway appeared to have been in a fairly safe position rolling towards the end of normal time, you had the scenario where the Galway defence failed to deal with two fairly speculative looking high balls, which one would expect any inter-county goalkeeper or backline to have got out of the way relatively easily enough, and of course, as we now know, both of the lobbed in shots ended up nestling in Conor Gleeson's net at the canal end, but even that didn't close out the drama, because you had then Rian O'Neill landing an absolute monstrous free for Armagh out under the Cusack stand to send it to overtime. And you know, I would have always said that, granted perhaps slightly biased, but I've yet to see anything to change my opinion that Brian Stafford was one of, if not the best place kicker ever to stand in Croke Park. But Rian O'Neill definitely, on what he produced today, was up there with anything any of the great kickers have produced over the years. Then of course we had, as referred to earlier, the mill-in when the teams were going down the tunnel at the end of full time. Now look, it has no place in the game, and we'll hear all the old cliches trotted out and whatnot. now that it has actually happened. I suppose from a whimsical point of view, it might finally take the gaze off the mid Mayo handbags of 1996. Some 26 years later, I think it deserves a rest, because it literally only looked like handbags and glad rags compared to some of what went on before the extra time there today. Undoubtedly, the most serious of which was what at least appeared to be, and I'm being very careful what I say here, going along the lines of innocent until proven guilty and all that, but what at the very least appeared to be an incident of eye gouging against Galway's Damien Comer. Now, to say that none of the scenes which occurred at full time have any place in the game is one thing, but the eye gouging is something that's at the complete extreme end of the no-no scale. And I know from being fairly used to observing other sports that well, I know if that was rugby, for example, the individual concerned would be looking at a suspension of months if it stopped at that, if it didn't go even further. And to my mind, I think the most distressing part of it would be the fact that, and again I'm being very careful here, the individual who appeared to perpetrate the incident, by all accounts was only a hanger-on within the Armagh party. I would have absolutely no doubt that when they are identified, which I know how these things work, I will have absolutely no doubt that the Armagh County Board will come under pressure to identify who the party was. If and when they are, I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess as to what sort of suspension they may be looking at. Whether the bigger question here now, of course, is whether Galway themselves incur extra suspensions outside of the one which will be due to fullback Sean Kelly having been sent off in the game. Now, like anything else going into an All-Ireland semi-final, there'll be enough pressure involved and things to be dealt with without having to worry about A, are we going to be short of X, Y and Z, and B, if we are, who do you put in instead of, or how do you rejig the situation? But when it comes down to the brass tacks, over the course of the 80 something minutes, it ended up being Galway probably were the better team. I mean, with respect, and I think anyone that read my article a couple of weeks back will know this, that I would be a great fan of Armagh and of the way they play football, and of course of Mr. McGeaney on the sideline. But I will say that over the course of the entire afternoon's football before the penalties, Galway probably were on balance the better team. Now, not by a lot, mind you, but they were the better team. It could be said that from the run of play, at least, Shane Walsh was kept reasonably quiet, but firstly he sort of he did stand up, I suppose, when Galway needed him most near the finish, not to mention when he absolutely buried his penalty in the shootout. But similar comments can equally be applied to Matty Tierney, who for a long time now it has been obvious the potential which he has. Now, he has already displayed it to some point, but I suspect, and I would imagine I'm not alone in this, that he can go to even further heights. And like Walsh today, when Galway's need was most, he was one of the men that stood up to the plinth and, came good when they wanted it most. Now, as for Armagh, obviously they would have to consider themselves unlucky. I mean, any team that loses on a penalty shootout is entitled to feel hard done by. Look, from a neutral perspective, obviously it's a great spectacle to watch, and great drama, great excitement. But if we are insistent on sticking to the amateur status in GAA, which we shouldn't be, of course, but that's a horse of a different colour altogether. But if we are staying down that road, it's an absolutely, totally cruel and unnecessary way for any team to lose a game of such importance. And the honest fact of the matter is, I don't believe it's necessary, for the simple reason that why there is now such a phobia about replays, and why there's such a rush to get things done, I will never know, because there certainly is a huge increase in the obsession with the club scene. I mean, to my mind, no matter what way the All-Ireland Championships were run, club championships up and down the country always got played off as well. Whereas this ridiculous situation we have at the minute, with the All-Ireland going to be over before the summer has basically started, all that does is present young lads basically with plane tickets and tell them, go on away, the whole summer is your own. And rather than being a help to the club scene up and down the country, it ends up being an absolute hindrance. But look, there's no point talking about that now, because it's hard enough to get the GAA to change. They're sure as hell not going to do it in the middle of a season. But looking forward, there's no doubt in my mind that from midfield up, Galway can absolutely live with anything that's left in it, and I would even include Dublin in that, from the point of view that if Damien Comer gets service with the right ball, he's a match for anybody. I mean, I remember a league final a couple of years ago, I think it was, where he absolutely tormented the Dublin full back line. But the flip side of that coin is, I would imagine Pádraig Joyce and his cohorts will be slightly perturbed tonight as well, knowing that basically Armagh sent in 3 Hail Mary balls, both at the end of normal time and the beginning of extra time, and the 3 of them ended up in the net. Now, I know they have a couple of weeks to straighten themselves out before they tackle Derry, and further to that, I'm sure they'll be aware that the last time they played Derry in an All-Ireland semi-final, in what I think was 2001, no, it wasn't 2001, I don't think. Well, I know they definitely played Derry in an All-Ireland semi-final in 1998, and they beat them fairly well from what I can remember at the time, but I would still be inclined to think that the tribesmen would want to augment their rear guard a little bit before taking on Rory Gallagher's side, because you can be absolutely sure that the Fermanagh man will have some class of system set up to try and stop primary ball going into the like of Damien Comer, and secondary ball going round on the loop to Rob Finnerty. So, in one sense, Galway have they have their work cut out for them, for the simple reason that number one, as I say, they definitely have issues to deal with from a defensive point of view, and their attack will have to be extremely inventive to break down what will probably be fairly mechanically organised Derry defensive action. Now, the other semi-final, of course, throws up. Well, just actually, before I go on to the other semi-final, just a quick word about Derry and Clare. Massive achievement for Clare to get to the stage of the championship they did, and huge commendation to Colm Collins, who along with Mr. McGeaney is, I think, one of the longest serving managers in championship football, and just as Armagh people will, I'm sure, hope that Geezer stays on with them for another year at least, Clare people will surely be begging Colm Collins to do likewise, because there's definitely, they were there yesterday on merit. Now, the only thing about it was Derry got through them for goals like a knife through butter at times. And again, that's something I'm sure Porrick Joyce will have noted and been slightly wary of. Derry, to a lesser extent, play a similar type of game to Armagh in some ways, in that you seen Shane McGuigan yesterday kicking scores from well out the field and not afraid to shoot from well out the field. Now, they're not quite as route one and basic as the lads from the Archer County are, but they can do a bit of that too, and I would feel that if they do go route one with ball down on top of McGuigan, that he certainly could cause the Galway defence some strenuous enough headaches. Then moving on to today's second game in Croke Park, we had yet another meeting between Kerry and Mayo, which almost by accident nearly at this stage has become one of the great modern rivalries in the game, and it was no different today in that there was only a point between the sides at half time, but I would suppose that what it also underlined, and again this will be no comfort to the poor long-suffering Mayo people, but for me the difference between the sides was encapsulated in the fact that when Stephen O'Brien and David Clifford combined at one end of the field, culminating with Clifford ending up in a one-on-one with Robbie Henley, he absolutely buried it. Whereas when Kevin McLaughlin ended up in a similar position in front of the Kerry goal, the Mayo man blazed it over the bar, and even at that stage, which was before half time indeed, you just got the feeling that was a pivotal swing going back in Kerry's direction. Now look, ultimately I suppose a combination of Clifford's goal and the black card dished out to Aidan O'Shea before half time ultimately did probably do for Mayo on this occasion, but just I said to somebody during the game on Sunday that even though Kerry did win relatively comfortably in the finish, and I suppose you're still left asking the question, have they been at full tilt, or are there still more gears there? Because if there are, you would imagine they will absolutely certainly need them to tackle Dublin next time out. But even though they did win relatively handy enough in the finish there this evening, I just at one stage thought that David Clifford could do with more support in the Kerry forward line at times. Now that's probably the case at any time, but allied that to the fact that He very obviously picked up an ankle injury very early on in the game, and I suppose from a Dublin point of view, or the point of view of anyone going out to face them, I suppose the daunting thing is the inclination that he wasn't at half throttled for a lot of that game today, and you could say to yourself, well, if he is fully fit by the time they come out in a couple of weeks' time and really lets himself go at full tilt, will the Dublin rear guard be able to put a clamp on him and slow him up? But I think there's another important angle to this here too. I mean, we know that Kerry have had a run there of about 8 or 9 years where they had exceptionally good minor teams and players coming off it and all the rest. But my thing would be, while the game still felt like a contest today, it felt like it was very much David Clifford against the whole of Mayo, or as Pat Spillane rightly pointed out during his punditry with RTE, David and Paddy Clifford against the opposition. And at a time when Mayo were still in the contest, good feeling in this seat was that Kerry definitely could have done with getting more support up to Clifford. That there was times when he appeared to be more or less taking on the whole of the Mayo defence on his own. Now obviously, as the game opened up and Mayo started to tire a little bit, other players like Paul Gainey and Shawnee Shea and Killian Spillane and even David Morden came into it after a while. But you will just be fairly certain that when Jack O'Connor's side go out to take on Dublin in a couple of weeks' time, that they cannot solely rely on either one Clifford or two Cliffords to nudge them over the line. I mean, they will need the two Clifford lads will need more backup if there is to be a chance of Kerry toppling Dublin. Now, from a spectator point of view, I suppose the beauty of the outcomes the whole weekend was that as spectators we still have it all to look forward to, and that we most certainly will. But it could be a long and interesting few days for Galway in particular, as they await David Coldrick rather, as they await his referee's report to see what he made and what sanctions he proposes out of the mill-in as the teams were heading down the tunnel. So we'll just have to wait and see in that regard.